Hey, I want to speak to you about our final small assignment, about this prompt here. First, for those folks who have looked at this prompt earlier in the week, I actually added a little something that you may or may not like. I added a scenario 3, and this third scenario is really me opening up the assignment a little bit. Let me provide some background. Originally, I wanted everybody to take a look at everything that we've done in the course and then to think about those components in the course that they find valuable, and then to apply those components to one of the two scenarios that I created. I had a couple of students in my on-site class, however, who asked whether or not they might be able to think of their own scenarios. And so I thought about that, and I thought, hey, why not? If they want to think of their own scenarios, and they want to pinpoint some of the support that they might find, then sure. And so now I've actually modified the prompt slightly so that there are 3 scenarios. Now, let me provide a little bit of background, and then I'll explain the prompt in depth, and then I'll give you a little framework that you can consider when you put this final project together. So let's work backwards. All of this starts from me asking you to take a look at this speech here, this speech from David Foster Wallace. And the whole reason that I ask you to read this speech is, well, number one, because the speech itself is pretty awesome. Specifically because the speech really asks us to consider what education does. And so it moves us away from a conversation about points and grades and fulfilling GE requirements and making sure that we can check a box on the IGETC program of study. And it returns the classroom or the educational space to one where the value of the materials in the classroom becomes important. There's a line near the end where we can really get an understanding of the argument that David Foster Wallace is making here. He says, in this section here, that this, I submit, is the freedom of a real education, of learning how to be well adjusted. You get to consciously decide what has meaning and what doesn't. And so I prefer to take this last week and a half of the course and push the pause button, so to speak, and to remind students that you get to consciously decide what has value. And specifically what I mean by that is I want you to reflect on the course and decide whether or not all of the materials in the course can be valuable. And I would hope that you can find value in at least some of the materials. I always find it amazing when I ask a student a couple semesters after they've taken a course what they enjoyed about the course, and they can't remember anything. And I often think that that happens not because there wasn't valuable material in the course, but because we didn't allow the student the time to actually reflect on the course, to make certain parts of that course meaningful. And so that's what I'm attempting to do here. And so if we look at the prompt, I've given you an overview of the entire course. I've tried to pepper this background with a ton of the concepts and skills and materials that we investigated in the course. And so I would hope that if you read through this background here, you're reminded of all of the stuff that we did. And then I would hope that you can reflect on that material. And when you reflect on it, you can maybe some ideas start to rise to the surface, right? Maybe that idea of writing to a specific audience stands out. Or maybe this notion of cultural narrative stands out. I would hope that there are some things that do come up. And so I ask you to think about those things, and then to take those things and apply them to the real world. And that's really what I'm doing here, is I'm giving you examples of what I consider the real world. I understand that the classroom is the real world, but I also understand that the classroom isn't the complete world. And I would hope that a course like this prepares us for our next writing courses, but I would hope that it prepares us for more than that as well. And so I've tried to create scenarios that are about as quotidian or everyday as they get. And so I've given you this Starbucks scenario, and then I've given you these links here because this is actually something that I myself have done, right? I walk into a coffee shop and I take a glance at the screens, and I take a look at what people are actually reading on those screens because I think, well, number one, because I'm just fascinated by it, but number two, because I think it gives us a pretty good understanding of some of the cultural currents. And then I gave you this scenario here, which for some of you is going to be quite familiar, right? This Common App scenario. And I've given you links to the sorts of ideas you might come across as you're filling out the Common App and thinking about transfer. And then, as I stated earlier, I've given you the opportunity to create your own scenario. And then, of course, you would have to provide your own support. So the idea, the basic idea, is that you're creating a short little analysis of a real-world scenario where you can highlight and then apply concepts from the course that you find valuable. That's it, right? And to help you out a little bit, I've created this little, what do I want to say, kind of conceptual template, this document that I hope just simplifies the process. In the introduction of your analysis, you're just going to specify this scenario, whether it's one of the ones that I've provided to you or one of the ones that you've created. And then in the body paragraphs, I'm really just asking that you provide a claim that clarifies a component or components in the course and then applies them to support from that real-world scenario. So I've given you a few here. Example 1. When I look around Starbucks, I actually see a discourse in action. I see patterns and I can draw conclusions about some of the values and ideologies that exist. Well, that's the sort of work we did in Unit 2. If you found that work valuable, then maybe that now becomes a way by which you can read experiences in daily life. Example 2. I note that 2 individuals are examining websites devoted to commerce. Well, there's just a little idea that I'm sure speaks to the book that we read throughout the course, and so you could potentially go off on that. And number 3, on the Common App web link, I noticed that they use a lot of language that frames the discussion in a very specific way given the audience. In this third example here, we're really highlighting this idea of writing for audience, which we did in Unit 1. And so here's the way that you can frame the paragraphs. And again, this is really to give you the time or the space to reflect on the course and to hopefully make it meaningful for you. Hope that this clarifies. Take care.